Emma Delacroix pushed her wire-framed glasses higher on her nose as she carefully removed the yellowed photograph from its acid-free envelope. The basement archives of the Louisiana Historical Society were silent except for the hum of dehumidifiers and the occasional drip from pipes overhead. Outside, New Orleans was experiencing its typical summer deluge, rain pounding against the small, high windows of the basement. "What do we have here?" she murmured to herself, gently placing the photograph under the light of her desk lamp. At 34, Emma had dedicated her career to preserving the history of New Orleans. When Hurricane Katrina had threatened to wash away countless historical documents, she had been among the volunteers who worked tirelessly to save what they could. Now, as the head archivist of the Louisiana Historical Society, she was tasked with digitizing their extensive collection of photographs dating back to the 1800s. The photograph before her showed 5 young women, sisters, according to the faded pencil notation on the back. The Winters Sisters, 1894. They were posed in what appeared to be the parlor of a Garden District mansion, all wearing the high-necked, long-sleeved dresses typical of the period. Their hair was elaborately styled, and they sat with perfect posture, hands folded in their laps. Emma carefully placed the photograph on the scanner bed, adjusting the settings to capture the highest possible resolution. As the machine hummed to life, her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague, Dr. Marcus Reynolds. "Found anything interesting in the winter collection?" Emma had been working through a recently donated collection from the Winter family, once prominent New Orleans residents who had owned several properties in the Garden District and had been involved in shipping and banking during the late 19th century. The family had died out in the 1920s, their fortune mysteriously dwindling and their reputation tarnished by rumors of scandal. "Just started on the photographs," she texted back. "I'll let you know." The scanner finished its work, and Emma opened the digital file on her computer. The high-resolution scan revealed details invisible to the naked eye. The intricate lace on the sisters' dresses, the ornate furniture, the pattern of the wallpaper. Emma zoomed in on the faces of the 5 young women, curious about the family that had once been so influential in New Orleans society. The eldest sister had a stern expression, her mouth set in a firm line. The second sister's eyes seemed vacant, staring past the camera. The third and fourth sisters, possibly twins, had identical small smiles. And the youngest, who couldn't have been more than 16, had a look of unmistakable fear in her eyes. "What were you afraid of?" Emma whispered, leaning closer to the screen. She zoomed in further on the youngest sister's face, then frowned. There was something reflected in the girl's wide eyes, something Emma couldn't quite make out. She adjusted the contrast and brightness of the image, enhancing the details. In the reflection of the youngest sister's eyes, barely visible even in the high-resolution scan, was the distorted image of a figure standing behind the camera, a figure that was not reflected in the mirror visible on the wall behind the sisters. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She zoomed out, examining the entire photograph again. The mirror on the wall behind the sisters should have shown the photographer, but it only reflected the empty parlor. She zoomed in on the eyes of each sister in turn, adjusting the image settings to enhance any reflections. In each pair of eyes, she found the same reflection. A tall, impossibly thin figure standing behind the camera, its features indistinct except for what appeared to be an unnaturally wide mouth. Emma sat back in her chair, her heart racing. The logical part of her brain insisted there must be an explanation. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, or an artifact of the photographic process used in the 1890s. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over her as she stared at the 5 young women and the reflection of something that should not have been there. Her phone buzzed again with another text from Marcus. "Well?" Emma hesitated, then replied, "I think you should come see this." 20 minutes later, Marcus Reynolds stood behind Emma's chair, leaning over her shoulder to examine the enhanced photograph on her computer screen. At 42, Marcus was a professor of history at Tulane University, specializing in the social history of New Orleans. He had collaborated with the Historical Society on numerous projects and had been particularly interested in the Winter family collection. "Are you sure it's not just an artifact of the scanning process?" he asked, his voice skeptical, but his expression troubled. "I've scanned hundreds of photographs from this era," Emma replied. "I've never seen anything like this." Marcus straightened up, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "The Winter family has always been something of an enigma in New Orleans history. They rose to prominence quickly in the 1870s, became fixtures of high society by the 1890s, and then just as quickly fell into obscurity by the 1920s. "What happened to them?" Emma asked, still staring at the unsettling image on her screen. "That's the thing. Nobody really knows. There are rumors, of course. This is New Orleans. There are always rumors." Marcus smiled wryly. "Some say they lost their fortune in bad investments. Others suggest there was some scandal that forced them out of society. The most sensational rumors involve voodoo curses and dealings with dark forces. And these sisters," Emma gestured to the photograph. "What happened to them?" Marcus's expression grew somber. "According to the limited records I've found, none of them ever married. They all lived together in the family mansion on First Street until 1912, when the youngest, that would be her, I think," he pointed to the frightened-looking sister, "was found dead in the house under mysterious circumstances. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but she was only in her 30s. And the others? The remaining sisters sold the house shortly after and moved to a smaller property in the French Quarter. They died one by one over the next decade. By 1922, they were all gone, and the Winter name died with them since none had children." Emma turned back to the photograph, a chill running down her spine despite the humid heat of the New Orleans summer. "There's something wrong about this picture, Marcus, and I want to know what it is." Marcus sighed, recognizing the determined set of Emma's jaw. "What do you propose?" "I want to see what else is in the Winter collection. There might be more photographs, journals, letters, anything that could explain what we're seeing here." "And if we find nothing?" Emma zoomed in once more on the reflection in the youngest sister's terrified eyes. "Then we go to the house. It's still standing, isn't it?" "Yes, it's on First Street in the Garden District. It's changed hands many times since the Winters lived there. Currently, it's owned by a corporation that rents it out for events and photo shoots." Marcus hesitated. "Emma, be careful with this. New Orleans has enough real horrors in its history without looking for supernatural ones." Emma nodded absently, her attention still fixed on the photograph. There was something about the eyes of the 5 sisters that haunted her, not just the reflections they contained, but the emotions they conveyed. Fear, resignation, knowledge of something terrible. "I'll be careful," she promised. "But these women have a story to tell, and I think we owe it to them to listen." As Emma spoke, a crack of thunder shook the building, and the lights flickered momentarily. When they stabilized, Emma thought she saw something move in the photograph on her screen, just for an instant, like the blink of an eye. But that was impossible. It was just a photograph, after all, just a moment captured in time over 130 years ago. Nothing in a photograph could move. Could it? The next morning, Emma arrived at the archives earlier than usual. She had slept poorly, her dreams haunted by 5 pairs of eyes and a thin figure with an unnaturally wide mouth. The rain had continued through the night, and water pooled on the streets of the French Quarter as she'd made her way to the Historical Society building. The Winter collection occupied several boxes, carefully catalogued, but not yet thoroughly examined. Emma pulled the first box toward her and began methodically going through its contents. Letters, legal documents, newspaper clippings, and more photographs. The letters revealed little of interest, mostly correspondence about business matters and social engagements. The legal documents showed the extent of the Winter family's wealth, property deeds, investment records, banking statements. By the 1890s, they had been one of the wealthiest families in New Orleans. The newspaper clippings were more intriguing. Most were society pages, mentions of the family attending various functions, but one from 1897 caught Emma's eye. It reported the sudden illness of Elizabeth Winter, the patriarch of the family, after her husband's death in 1889. Mrs. Elizabeth Winter, prominent society matron, has taken ill with a mysterious malady, the article read. Physicians are baffled by her condition, which is characterized by periods of unconsciousness, followed by episodes of disturbing behavior. The Winter daughters have withdrawn from social engagements to attend to their mother. Emma made a note of this, then turned to another clipping from 1898. The condition of Mrs. Elizabeth Winter continues to deteriorate. Reports from the Winter household suggest the once formidable matron now spends her days in a darkened room, refusing all visitors and speaking only to her daughters. Rumors of strange sounds emanating from the Winter mansion have been dismissed by family representatives as the product of overactive imaginations. And finally, a brief obituary from early 1899. Mrs. Elizabeth Winter, widow of shipping magnate Harold Winter, passed away yesterday at her Garden District home after a lengthy illness. She is survived by her 5 daughters. The family has requested privacy during their time of mourning. Emma sat back, processing this information. The timeline suggested that the photograph of the 5 sisters had been taken around the time their mother began exhibiting strange symptoms. Could that explain the fear in the youngest sister's eyes? She turned to the additional photographs in the collection. Most were formal portraits of individual family members or group shots at social events. None showed the same reflection anomaly as the photograph of the 5 sisters. Then, at the bottom of the box, she found a small, leather-bound journal. The name, Clara Winter, was inscribed on the first page in delicate handwriting. According to the family records, Clara had been the youngest of the 5 sisters. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she opened the journal. The entries began in 1893 and continued sporadically until 1912, the year Clara died. The early entries were typical of a young woman of her time and social standing. Observations about social events, mild complaints about her sisters, mentions of young men she found interesting. But the entries took a darker turn in late 1894, around the time the photograph had been taken. September 15th, 1894. Mother insisted we have our portrait taken today. I begged to be excused, but she would not hear of it. The photographer, Mr. Guidry, brought his equipment to the house. I do not like that man. There is something in his eyes that frightens me, something hungry. When he looks at us through his camera, it feels as though something else is looking as well, something that should not be there. Emma's breath caught. She read on. September 16th, 1894. I dreamt of Mr. Guidry's camera last night. In the dream, I was trapped inside it, looking out through the lens. Outside was not our parlour, but a dark place filled with twisted shapes, and Mr. Guidry was there. But he was not as he appears in waking life. He was tall and thin, impossibly so, and his mouth, I cannot bear to describe it. I woke screaming, and Agnes came to comfort me. She says it was just a nightmare, but I am not so sure. Emma quickly flipped through the journal, looking for more entries about the photographer or the photograph itself. She found another, dated a week later. September 23rd, 1894. Mr. Guidry delivered our portrait today. Mother is pleased with it, but I cannot look at it without shuddering. In the photograph, my eyes seem to reflect something that was not in the room with us. The others say I am being fanciful, but Margaret admitted to me in private that she feels uneasy about the portrait as well. Mother has hung it in the main hallway, and now I must pass it every time I go up or down the stairs. Each time, I feel as though the eyes in the photograph follow me, not just my own eyes, but those of my sisters as well. And behind us all, though invisible in the photograph itself, I sense a presence, watching, waiting, Emma's phone buzzed, startling her so badly she nearly dropped the journal. It was Marcus. "Found anything?" His text read. Emma quickly photographed the journal entries she'd found and sent them to Marcus, along with a message. The youngest sister, Clara, mentions the photographer and feeling that something was wrong with the portrait. And look at this. The mother became ill with a mysterious malady a few years after the photograph was taken. Marcus's reply came quickly. Interesting, but hardly evidence of anything supernatural. Could be coincidence, or Clara could have been troubled in some way. Emma frowned at her phone. "There's more to the journal. I'm going to keep reading." "Be my guest," Marcus replied. "But remember what I said about looking for supernatural explanations in a city with plenty of natural horrors." Emma set her phone aside and continued reading Clara's journal. The entries became less frequent after 1894, but those that existed painted a picture of increasing unease within the Winter household. Clara wrote of her mother's deteriorating condition, of strange noises in the night, of shadows that moved when they shouldn't. One entry from 1898, shortly before Elizabeth Winter's death, was particularly disturbing. December 10th, 1898. "Mother called me to her room today. She has taken down all the mirrors and keeps the curtains drawn. The doctors say it is part of her madness, but I am not so certain. She took my hand and spoke more clearly than she has in months. It came through the camera," she said. "Mr. Gidry brought it into our home, and now it will not leave until it has taken all of us." When I asked what she meant, she became agitated. "Look at the photograph," she insisted. "Look at your eyes in the photograph. You can see it there. It is waiting for us." The nurse made me leave then, but Mother's words have left me cold with fear. I went to look at the portrait again, studying my own reflection captured in the glass, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something move behind my image, something tall and thin with a mouth that stretched too wide. Emma closed the journal, her heart pounding. She needed to see what happened next, but she also needed a moment to process what she had read. Clara's words echoed what Emma had seen in the high-resolution scan of the photograph. Reflections in the sister's eyes of something that should not have been there. Her phone buzzed again with a text from Marcus. "I've been doing some research on the photographer, Auguste Guidry. He was active in New Orleans from approximately 1880 to 1905, specialized in portrait photography for wealthy families. Nothing particularly unusual about him in the historical record, except..." Emma waited, but no further text came. After a minute, she texted back, "Except what?" The reply came almost immediately. "Except the manner of his death. According to an obituary I found, he was discovered in his studio in 1905, apparently having hanged himself. The article mentions that his body was found in a state of grotesque distortion, as though the deceased had been attempting to escape his fate even in his final moments. Macabre, but not unheard of in suicide cases." Emma stared at her phone, a chill running through her despite the humidity of the archive room. She texted back, "Is there any mention of what happened to his photographic equipment after his death?" "I'll see what I can find," Marcus replied. "In the meantime, how about you meet me for lunch? I think you could use a break from the archives." Emma glanced at her watch, surprised to find it was already past noon. She had been so engrossed in Clara's journal that she had lost track of time. "Meet you at Napoleon House in 30 minutes, she texted back. Before leaving, she carefully returned the journal to its acid-free box, but kept the original photograph with her. Something told her she shouldn't leave it behind. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, but the air was thick with humidity. As Emma walked through the French Quarter toward Napoleon House, she found herself studying the windows and reflective surfaces she passed, half expecting to glimpse a tall, thin figure with an unnaturally wide mouth. Napoleon House was busy with the lunch crowd, but Marcus had secured a table in the corner. He stood when he saw Emma approach, his expression concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said as she sat down. "Not yet," Emma replied, attempting a smile, "but I'm beginning to think I might." She placed the photograph on the table between them, carefully protected in its archival sleeve. "I can't stop thinking about what Clara wrote, about something coming through the camera." Marcus sighed, taking off his glasses and cleaning them with his napkin. "Emma, you know as well as I do that the late 19th century was rife with spiritualism and supernatural beliefs. Photography was still relatively new and mysterious to many people. It's not surprising that someone might attribute supernatural qualities to it, especially someone who might have been troubled mentally. But what about what we can see in the scan?" Emma insisted. "The reflection in their eyes of something that isn't reflected in the mirror behind them, which could be explained by any number of technical factors. The angle of the light, limitations of the photographic process at the time, artifacts introduced during development." Emma leaned forward. "Then explain this. I went back and checked the original scan again this morning. I looked at the reflection in the mirror behind the sisters, the one that should show the photographer, but doesn't. And when I zoomed in and enhanced that section, I found something. The mirror doesn't show Auguste Guidry or his camera. But at the very edge of the frame, it shows the corner of what appears to be a tall, thin shadow. A shadow that doesn't correspond to anything visible in the room." Marcus's skeptical expression faltered slightly. "Could be a defect in the photograph." "Maybe," Emma conceded. "But combined with Clara's journal entries, it's starting to paint a disturbing picture." She paused as a waiter approached to take their orders, then continued once they were alone again. "There's something else. Clara's journal continues all the way to 1912, the year she died. I haven't read the later entries yet, but I did skip ahead to the final one, dated just 2 days before her death." "And?" Emma pulled out her phone, where she had photographed the entry. "Listen to this. I am the last now. Margaret died yesterday, joining Agnes, Beatrice, and Ruth. Like them, she wasted away, becoming thin and pale, her eyes growing larger in her face as the rest of her diminished. And in those eyes, I could see the reflection of what waits for me as well. It has been patient all these years, feeding slowly on each of us in turn, growing stronger as we grow weaker. I've moved the photograph to my bedroom now. I want to keep it close, to understand what it is before it takes me too. Sometimes, when I look at it in a certain light, I can see movement within the frame, as though the moment captured is not fixed, but fluid, changing. My sister's eyes follow me around the room, and behind them I can see it waiting. The thing Mr. Guidry brought into our home through his camera. The thing with the wide mouth and the hunger that cannot be satisfied. I have tried to destroy the photograph, but it cannot be burned or torn. Whatever magic or science Mr. Guidry used to create it has made it impervious to destruction, so I will do the only thing I can. I will hide it where it cannot be found, and I will pray that it dies with me." Marcus was silent for a long moment after Emma finished reading. "That's," he finally said, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "Disturbing," Emma supplied. "And possibly the ravings of a disturbed mind. But what if it's not? What if there's something more to this photograph?" Lynn. She tapped the archival sleeve containing the image of the 5 sisters. If Clara tried to hide it, how did it end up in the family collection that was donated to the Historical Society? "That's actually something I can answer," Marcus said, visibly relieved to be back on solid historical ground. The Winter family collection wasn't donated directly by any family members. It was found in the attic of the First Street house during renovations in the 1950s and eventually made its way to the Historical Society in the 1970s. So the photograph was hidden in the house, just as Clara said she intended to do. Or it was simply stored there with other family papers and forgotten after the last sister died, Marcus countered. The waiter returned with their meals, but Emma found she had little appetite. Her mind was racing with questions and possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. "I want to see the house," she said suddenly. The Winter Mansion on First Street. Marcus took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. As I mentioned, it's now owned by a corporation that rents it out for events. There's one scheduled for this weekend, some sort of photography exhibition. Ironically enough, I could probably get us in as part of the setup crew. I know the event organizer. Photography exhibition? Emma echoed, a chill running down her spine. Yes, it's showcasing the work of contemporary New Orleans photographers alongside historical images of the city. Marcus smiled wryly. Rather fitting, don't you think? Emma looked down at the photograph in its protective sleeve. Had she imagined it, or had something moved within the frame, just for an instant? A subtle shift in the position of one of the sisters' hands, perhaps, or a blink of an eye. Very fitting, she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's go to the house, Marcus. I need to see where this photograph was taken, where the Winter sisters lived, where Clara died. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. I'll make the arrangements, but Emma, promise me you'll keep an open mind. There may be a perfectly rational explanation for everything we've found. I hope you're right, Emma said, though deep down she was beginning to believe that what they were dealing with went beyond rational explanation. Something about the photograph of the 5 Winter sisters and the reflection captured in their eyes suggested a horror that transcended the boundaries of the natural world, and Emma feared they were about to come face to face with it. The Winter Mansion on First Street stood like a grand dame among the stately homes of the Garden District. Its white columns and wrought-iron balconies gleamed in the late afternoon sun, which had finally emerged after days of rain. The oak trees lining the street cast dappled shadows across the manicured lawn, and the air was heavy with the scent of magnolias and wet earth. Emma stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the house, the photograph of the 5 sisters tucked safely in her bag. Beside her, Marcus checked his phone. We're a bit early, he said. Jeremy, the event coordinator, said he'd meet us here at 5. Emma nodded absently, her attention fixed on the house. It was beautiful, undeniably so, yet there was something oppressive about its grandeur, something that made her reluctant to approach the wide front steps. What do you know about the house's history after the Winter family? She asked, still not taking her eyes off the building. Marcus pocketed his phone. It changed hands several times. The first buyers after the Winter sisters sold it were the Beaumont family, who lived here until the 1940s. Then it was purchased by a doctor who converted it into a private clinic for a while. In the 1960s, it was bought by an investment group that restored it to its original state and began renting it out for events. The current owners acquired it in the early 2000s and have continued that business model. Has anyone ever reported anything unusual about the house? Marcus gave her a sideways look. You mean like ghosts, hauntings, strange reflections in mirrors? Emma turned to face him. I'm serious, Marcus. 5 women died in that house, all sisters, all unmarried, all within a relatively short span of time. And according to Clara's journal, they all exhibited the same symptoms. Wasting away, becoming thin and pale. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Before Marcus could respond, a silver SUV pulled up to the curb, and a man in his early 30s stepped out carrying a tablet. He waved at Marcus. Jeremy, Marcus greeted him, extending his hand. Thanks for meeting us. No problem, Jeremy replied, shaking Marcus's hand and then Emma's. Always happy to help out the Historical Society. You said you're researching the original owners. That's right, Emma said. The Winter family. We recently found some photographs and documents related to them, and we're hoping to get a better understanding of the context by seeing the house. Jeremy nodded, leading them up the front steps. Well, you're in luck. Part of this weekend's exhibition actually focuses on the historical significance of the house, including some information about the Winter family. We've set up in the main parlor, which I understand is largely unchanged from their time. Emma felt her heart rate increase as Jeremy unlocked the massive front door and led them into a grand entrance hall. The interior was cool and dim after the brightness outside, with high ceilings and polished wooden floors. A sweeping staircase dominated one side of the hall, leading up to a gallery that ran around the second floor. "The parlor is through here," Jeremy said, gesturing to a set of pocket doors to their right. Emma followed him, acutely aware of the weight of the photograph in her bag. As they entered the parlor, she immediately recognized it as the setting of the photograph. The proportions of the room, the placement of the windows, the ornate fireplace, all matched what she had seen in the image of the five sisters. "This is it," she murmured to Marcus. "This is where they sat for the photograph." The parlor was being set up for the exhibition, with display panels and lighting equipment arranged around the perimeter of the room. In the center, several workers were assembling what appeared to be glass display cases. "We'll be showcasing some original photographs of the garden district from the 1890s in these cases," Jeremy explained, noticing Emma's interest. "On loan from private collectors." "Do you have any photographs taken by Auguste Guidry?" Emma asked. Jeremy looked surprised. "As a matter of fact, we do." "How did you know?" "He was the photographer who took pictures of the Winter family," Emma replied, trying to keep her voice steady, "including one we recently found in our archives. Would you like to see the Guidry photographs we have? They've already been set up in that display case over there." Emma nodded, and Jeremy led them to a glass case near the fireplace. Inside were several sepia-toned photographs, all formal portraits of New Orleans families from the late 19th century. Emma scanned them quickly, looking for any sign of the same anomaly she had found in the Winter Sisters photograph. "These all seem to be standard portraits," Marcus commented, leaning in to examine them more closely. "There's nothing standard about Guidry's work," Jeremy said, a note of enthusiasm entering his voice. "He was known for the unusual clarity and depth of his photographs. Some experts believe he may have developed a unique chemical process for his development, though no records of his methods survive." "What happened to his equipment after his death?" Emma asked, remembering her earlier question to Marcus. "That's an interesting story," Jeremy replied. "According to the research we've done for the exhibition, his camera and other equipment were acquired by another photographer, who claimed that the images produced with Guidry's camera had an unsettling quality to them. The equipment changed hands several times, with each owner reporting similar experiences until it was eventually lost in a fire in 1922. 1922, Emma repeated, "the same year the last of the Winter Sisters died." Jeremy gave her a curious look. "That's right. Do you know much about the Winter family?" "We're learning," Emma said. "Would it be possible for us to see the rest of the house? Particularly any rooms that would have belonged to the Winter Sisters?" "Of course," Jeremy agreed. "Let me just check with the setup crew to make sure they don't need me for a few minutes." As Jeremy stepped away to speak with the workers, Marcus leaned close to Emma. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I'm fine," Emma insisted, though she felt anything but. Being in the room where the photograph had been taken, surrounded by other images captured by the same photographer, was making her increasingly uneasy. "I just want to see where Clara died." "We don't know for certain which room was hers," Marcus cautioned. "According to her journal, she moved the photograph to her bedroom shortly before her death," Emma said. "If we can figure out which room that was, we might find some clue about what happened to her and to her sisters." Jeremy returned a moment later. "They're good for now. Let me show you around. The house has 5 bedrooms on the second floor, which would have been where the Winter Sisters slept. The master bedroom, which would have belonged to their parents, is at the front of the house overlooking the street." He led them back to the entrance hall and up the sweeping staircase. The upper gallery was lined with doors leading to various rooms. Jeremy pointed out the master bedroom, then showed them the other bedrooms, each decorated in period-appropriate style, though with modern amenities discreetly incorporated for the comfort of overnight guests when the house was rented for events. "Do you know which of these rooms would have belonged to the youngest sister, Clara?" Emma asked as they completed the tour of the second floor. Jeremy shook his head. The historical records aren't that specific, I'm afraid. But if I had to guess, it might be this one. He indicated a smaller bedroom at the back of the house. It's a bit set apart from the others, and according to some of the architectural notes we have, it was the last bedroom to be added to the house as part of an expansion in the 1880s. Emma approached the room, which was furnished with a four-poster bed, a dressing table and a small writing desk by the window. Unlike the other bedrooms, which had been updated with subtle modern touches, this room seemed frozen in time, as though it had been deliberately preserved as it might have been in the early 1900s. This room is a bit different from the others, Emma observed. Yes, Jeremy agreed. The previous owners maintained it as a sort of historical exhibit. They claimed it was the most authentic room in the house, with most of the furniture being original to the Winter family period. The current owners have kept it that way as a point of interest for historically minded guests. Emma moved to the center of the room, turning slowly to take in every detail. The wallpaper was faded, but still showed a pattern of small blue flowers. The wooden floor creaked slightly under her feet. The window overlooked the back garden, where an ancient oak tree spread its branches, partially blocking the late afternoon sunlight. Something about the room felt different from the rest of the house. While the other rooms had been grand and imposing, but ultimately empty of presence, this room felt occupied, somehow, as though someone had just stepped out for a moment and might return at any time. Emma approached the dressing table, which held an antique silver brush and mirror set. The mirror was tarnished around the edges, its reflective surface cloudy with age. She leaned forward, studying her reflection, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something move behind her, a tall, thin shape at the edge of her vision. She whirled around, her heart pounding, but there was nothing there except Marcus and Jeremy standing in the doorway, watching her with concerned expressions. "Emma," Marcus said, taking a step toward her. "What is it?" Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. "Nothing, just my imagination." She turned back to the dressing table, avoiding looking in the mirror this time, and noticed a small drawer in the center of the table. Acting on impulse, she pulled it open. Inside was a folded piece of paper yellowed with age. Emma carefully removed it and unfolded it, revealing handwriting she recognized immediately from the journal. Clara's handwriting. "Marcus," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look at this." Marcus crossed the room to stand beside her, while Jeremy remained in the doorway, a puzzled expression on his face. The note was dated May 14th, 1912, 2 days after the final entry in Clara's journal and the day she died according to historical records. It read, "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and my attempt to take it with me has failed. The photograph must be destroyed, though I do not know how. It has resisted fire and blade. Perhaps time will accomplish what I cannot. But beware, do not look too deeply into the eyes of my sisters or myself. Do not seek what is reflected there. It waits still, hungry after all these years. It came through the camera's eye, and now it watches through ours. If you have found the photograph, burn this house to the ground with it inside. It is the only way to be sure." Emma's hands trembled as she held the note. "This was written the day she died," she said to Marcus. "She knew something was going to happen to her." "What photograph is she talking about?" Jeremy asked, stepping into the room. "Is it one of the Gidry photographs we have downstairs?" Emma hesitated, then reached into her bag and carefully removed the archival sleeve containing the photograph of the 5 Winter sisters. "This one," she said, holding it up without removing it from its protective covering. "We found it in the Historical Society archives, part of the Winter family collection." Jeremy moved closer, examining the photograph with professional interest. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand. Emma reluctantly handed him the sleeve. Jeremy held it up to the fading light from the window, studying the image of the 5 sisters. "Extraordinary clarity for a photograph of that period," he murmured. "That's characteristic of Guidry's work. The level of detail he captured was remarkable for the technology available at the time." He looked up at Emma. "What exactly is it about this photograph that concerns you?" Before Emma could respond, the lights in the room flickered, then went out completely. The house was suddenly plunged into twilight gloom, the only illumination coming from the fading daylight through the windows. "Power outage," Jeremy said with a sigh. "Happens sometimes in these old houses. The wiring was updated, but it can be temperamental during weather changes." He pulled out his phone and turned on its flashlight. "Let me check the breaker box. I'll be right back." As Jeremy left the room, Marcus moved closer to Emma. "What do you make of this note?" he asked in a low voice, gesturing to the paper still clutched in Emma's hand. "It confirms what Clara wrote in her journal," Emma replied, her voice tight. "She believed there was something wrong with the photograph, something dangerous, and she tried to, take it with her when she died. Which clearly didn't work, since the photograph ended up in the Historical Society archives," Marcus pointed out. A floorboard creaked behind them, and they both turned quickly, but the doorway was empty. Jeremy had already descended the stairs, his footsteps fading as he made his way to the breaker box. "This house is over 130 years old," Marcus said, noticing Emma's startled reaction. "Old houses make noises." Emma nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the room. The fading daylight cast long shadows, and the corners of the bedroom seemed darker than they should be, as though the darkness was somehow denser there. She turned back to the dressing table and its tarnished mirror. Despite her trepidation, she leaned forward again, studying her reflection. Behind her, she could see Marcus examining the note she had found, and beyond him, the empty doorway. But as she watched, a shadow seemed to detach itself from the corner of the room. A tall, thin shape that was there and then gone in an instant when she blinked. Emma gasped and spun around, but again there was nothing there except Marcus, who looked up at her with concern. "What is it?" he asked, setting down the note. "I thought I saw," Emma began, then shook her head. "Nothing. It's just the light playing tricks." Marcus crossed to the window, looking out at the garden where shadows were lengthening as the sun began to set. "It will be dark soon. Maybe we should continue this tomorrow in better light." Emma was about to agree when she remembered something. "The photograph," she said suddenly. "Jeremy still has it." As if on cue, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room with harsh electric light that banished the shadows to the corners. "Problem solved," Jeremy's voice called from the hallway. "Just a tripped breaker." He appeared in the doorway, still holding the archival sleeve containing the photograph of the Winter sisters. "Sorry about that," he said. "Now, what were you saying about this photograph?" Emma hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to Jeremy about their discoveries. Before she could decide, Marcus spoke up. "Emma found something unusual when she was digitizing it," he explained. "When she zoomed in on the sisters' eyes, she noticed reflections that don't match what should have been reflected based on the room's layout." Jeremy raised an eyebrow, his interest clearly piqued. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward a lamp on the bedside table. Emma nodded, and Jeremy carefully removed the photograph from its protective sleeve and held it under the lamplight, examining it closely. "I don't see anything unusual," he said after a moment. "But then, I don't have the advantage of digital enhancement." "It's most noticeable in the youngest sister's eyes," Emma said, moving to stand beside him. "Clara's eyes." Jeremy leaned closer to the photograph, his face inches from the sepia-toned image. "Interesting," he murmured. "There does seem to be something reflected there, but it's too small to make out clearly with the naked eye." As Jeremy studied the photograph, Emma found her gaze drawn to the mirror on the dressing table again. From her new position, she could see the reflection of Jeremy holding the photograph under the lamp and Marcus standing behind them, reading Clara's note again. But there was something else in the mirror, something that made Emma's blood run cold. In the reflection, The photograph in Jeremy's hands appeared different. The five sisters were not posed as they had been. They were looking directly at the camera, their eyes wide and their mouths open in what looked like silent screams. And behind them, clearly visible in the mirror's reflection of the photograph, but not in the photograph itself as Jeremy held it, was a tall, thin figure with an impossibly wide mouth. Emma stumbled backward, a cry escaping her lips before she could stop it. Both Marcus and Jeremy looked up, alarmed. "Emma," Marcus said, reaching for her arm to steady her. "What's wrong?" Emma pointed at the mirror, but when she looked again, the reflection was normal. The photograph in Jeremy's hands appeared in the mirror exactly as it did in reality. 5 young women in Victorian dress posed sedately in the parlor downstairs. Emma began, then stopped, unsure what to say. Had she imagined it? "Nothing. I just felt dizzy for a moment." Jeremy looked concerned. "These old houses can sometimes have that effect, especially in rooms that haven't been properly ventilated. Maybe we should go back downstairs." Emma nodded, grateful for the suggestion. As they left the room, she cast one final glance at the mirror, but it showed only the empty room behind them. They descended the grand staircase in silence, Emma's mind racing with questions and doubts. Had she really seen what she thought she saw in the mirror? Or was her imagination, fueled by Clara's journal and note, playing tricks on her? In the entrance hall, Jeremy handed the photograph back to Emma, who quickly returned it to its protective sleeve and tucked it into her bag. "Thank you for showing us around," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's been very helpful for our research." "My pleasure," Jeremy replied. "Will you be attending the exhibition this weekend? We'd be happy to have representatives from the Historical Society there." "We'll see," Marcus answered for both of them. "We have a lot of research to process first." Outside, the sun had set, and the garden district was bathed in the purple twilight of a New Orleans evening. The air was still heavy with humidity, and the scent of jasmine mingled with the earthy smell of the rain-soaked ground. Emma and Marcus walked in silence for a few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Are you going to tell me what really happened up there? When you looked in the mirror?" Emma stopped walking and turned to face him. "You'll think I'm losing my mind." "Try me," Marcus said, his expression serious. "After what we've found so far, I'm prepared to consider possibilities I might have dismissed yesterday." Emma took a deep breath. "When I looked in the mirror, I saw the reflection of the photograph Jeremy was holding. But in the reflection it was different. The sisters they looked terrified, and behind them was a figure, tall and thin, with a mouth that—" She shuddered, unable to complete the description. Marcus was silent for a long moment. "Like the figure Clara described in her journal," he finally said. "The thing she saw reflected in their eyes in the photograph." Emma nodded. "But when I looked again, the reflection was normal, so either I imagined it or whatever is in that photograph is somehow able to manifest in reflections, but only momentarily," Marcus finished for her. "Which sounds impossible, but then again, so does a photograph that can't be destroyed by fire or blade, as Clara claimed." They resumed walking, each considering the implications of what they had discovered. The streets were quiet, most of the Garden District residents having retreated indoors for the evening. "What do we do now?" Emma asked after a while. "We go back to the Historical Society tomorrow," Marcus said decisively. "We finish reading Clara's journal. We see if there's anything else in the winter collection that might explain what happened to the sisters, and we try to find out more about Auguste Guidry and his camera." Emma nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her bag where the photograph was stored. "And what about this? Should we try to destroy it, as Clara suggested?" "Let's not be hasty," Marcus cautioned. "It's a historical artifact, regardless of any unusual properties it might have. Besides, if Clara was right and it resisted her attempts to destroy it, what makes you think we'd have any more success?" They had reached the corner where they would part ways, Marcus heading to his car and Emma to the streetcar stop that would take her back to her apartment in the Marigny. "Be careful with that photograph tonight," Marcus said, his expression troubled. "Maybe put it in a drawer or something out of sight." "I will," Emma promised, though she had already decided she would do more than that. She would lock it in her fireproof safe, where she kept her most valuable documents. Something told her she didn't want to leave the photograph of the 5 Winter Sisters, where it might be reflected in any mirror or glass surface in her apartment.